Hi, I figured we could go ahead and walk through the problem that's showing up in your homework. So this problem is asking you to go ahead and divide the fractions and simplify as much as possible. You already know that if you're dividing fractions, you can change it to a multiplication problem by taking the second fraction, flipping it, and then multiplying. So once you've changed it to a multiplication problem, you want to factor as much as possible and then cancel the factors that show up in the top and the bottom. So you're only allowed to cancel something if that factor shows up in the top somewhere and in the bottom somewhere. So that means that you cannot cancel at all if both factors show up in the top, and you can't factor if both factors show up in the bottom. We also would need to be a little bit careful about what we think a factor is. A factor is something that is multiplied by everything else. So if we look at what is here already, the 121 would end up being multiplied by the 7w minus 2. So it would end up being multiplied by everything, which means the 121 is a factor, but the 7w is not a factor because the 7w is not multiplied by the 2. The 2 is subtracted from the 7w. So I'm not allowed to cancel the w's because they're not factors of everything else since they're not multiplied by everything else. So you have to be a little bit careful. Whenever there is a plus or a minus right next to what you're working with, you're not going to be able to cancel it all. So what I can do is I can go ahead and cancel the 121 on the top and the bottom because those are factors. Sorry, my dogs are growling. And then what we're left with is that w plus 11 over 7w minus 2. You would try to factor as much as possible at this point to see if you could cancel anything else, but w and 11 don't have anything in common, so you can't factor anything out of the top, and 7w and 2 don't have anything in common, so you can't factor anything out of the bottom either. And since you don't have the same exact factor on the top and the bottom, I can't cancel anything else. So it's because the w's are terms that I'm not allowed to cancel them out of the top and the bottom. So they have a plus or minus right next to them. So it's a general rule. If there's a plus or minus right next to it, do not cancel. So I hope that was helpful. I think I've got one more problem to look at. Okay, so that other problem that I'm going to go ahead and look at is 3 divided by 14x plus 196 equals what over 14y over x plus 14. So the goal of this problem is to rewrite the fraction on the left so that it has the same denominator as the fraction on the right. And so to be able to do that, we really need to examine the denominator on the left. So when we're looking at the denominator on the left, we need to see what we can factor out so that we can see what factors match what's on the right so that we know what to do to make them look the same. And so what we would probably do here is we'd say, okay, 14 is 2 times 7. Does 196 have factors of 2 and 7? Does it have a factor of 14 in it? What can I factor out of both of the terms? So if you pull a calculator up and you take 196, I'm going to try to type that in, 196, and you divide by 2, it does divide evenly, so let's see if 196 is divisible by 7. It's also divisible by 7, which means it's going to be divisible by 14 because it's divisible by 2 and 7. So I'm going to take 196 and divide by 14, and I get 14, which means that I can go ahead and factor a 14 out of the 14x and the 196. If I factor that 14 out of the 14x plus 196, I'm going to get 14 times x plus 14. So then if we look back at the right-hand side of that equation, I can see now that the only difference between the denominator on the left and the denominator on the right is that y that I went ahead and wrote in blue to make it more obvious. But that everything else is exactly the same. So in order to rewrite the fraction on the left so that it looks like the fraction on the right, I'm going to have to multiply the bottom by y. But if I multiply the bottom by y, I have to multiply the top by y. Because you know with fractions, whatever you do to the bottom of the fraction, you have to do to the top of the fraction. So you can see that I multiplied y on the top and the bottom of the fraction on the left. So that means that the numerator on the fraction on the left ends up being 3y, since I had to multiply the bottom by y, had to multiply the top by y. So now you can see that the denominators match exactly. So then question mark has to be equal to 3y since I multiplied it by y. So I hope that made things a little bit clearer. If you have any questions, let me know. But I hope this helped.